Hi, good morning, everybody. Ooh, that made everyone wake up, didn't it? Can you please take a seat? I'm going to get ready for the Future Frontiers session. We've got some amazing speakers this morning, and we're really grateful to them. So please take a pew. Right, so the first piece of information is I am clearly not Professor Peter Roberts. Peter sends his apologies. He's actually a bit under the weather. So Peter, back to you. We hope you feel really well and can join us again soon. So the first person we've got up this morning, and it's very short intros because I would really like us to focus on the content and you can get to know the person afterwards. So Ian Greig, who's a senior principal scientist from Dstl. Could you please join us and share? Thank you.
Morning, everyone. I haven't got any slides, so you're just going to be listening to me for the next 10 minutes or so. Originally, it was supposed to be my colleague, Carolyn Shaw, who was going to be standing here, but she had a better offer, so she's off in Canada this week. Better offer? You'll have to take it up with her. But, so you're going to get my take on the sort of futures piece today. So first thing I was thinking about was sort of doing the whole looking back to look forward thing. So, you know, how things have changed since I came into this area a number of years ago and sort of project forward to the equivalent time in the future. And I did the sums and worked out that 2058 really was probably too far in the future to be relevant, and also a little bit depressing to think about how long I've been doing this. So just looking back to 1990 when I first joined the MOD and what we were doing on simulation and training then, and quite how things have changed. So the technology's changed fantastically. You know, we were using enormous, great CRT monitors that weighed half a ton and broke if you looked at them too hard. We weren't really making use of networking at all at the time. The training was focused very much on preparing individuals for their live training. So it was very much individual skills, emergencies, but very much the poor cousin. But where we are today, where we've got these vast networks of network simulation that we can go from ab initio through to people who are just about to deploy, and where that blend of simulation and live training provides a really powerful and compelling set of tools for us to use to prepare our people for the things we ask them to do. So I think it's very easy for anyone to sit down and look at the sort of the latest buzzword technologies, AI, XR, data and analytics, and start thinking about how they are going to influence training in the future as they mature and we integrate them into our systems. But I think there's another layer to it that perhaps we're not thinking about enough, and that's around how do these things actually integrate into our training enterprise. So you can think about a particular training system, and you can think about how these technologies can be integrated into that and how the benefits can come from that. But I think we're missing a trick if we don't think about this from the top down as well, from the enterprise level. Because you can end up with an individual training system that's been enhanced through the use of these technologies, but actually is an island unto itself. It's not really integrating with the training systems, the training courses that came before it, and it's not able to feed into the training courses that come afterwards. So I think the quick way of getting the benefit from these technologies is to take that bottom-up approach, but the smart way to do it is to also look at the top-down and actually how this integrates across the whole of defense to try and make sure we're getting the most benefit from these. So I'll come back to that in a bit. So I just wanted to talk about what does future training mean to me. And I think there's a whole load of different ways of approaching that. So you can think about, is it about accelerating learning? So is it about allowing our people to reach the level of competence that we need them to be at in a shorter amount of time? So is that what we're aiming for? Or is it about making sure that our people coming out of our training systems are actually more robust in terms of their resilience and their decision making than they have been in the past, because we're asking them to go into an environment that's a lot more sort of volatile, uncertain, congested, and ambiguous than it has been in the past. So is that the focus for future training? Is it actually making our folk more resilient, more robust to the complexity of the future battle space? Or is it, and I fear this might be the one, is it purely about saving money? Is it about getting people to competence using as few resources as possible, not really providing perhaps them with greater benefit? So I think we in MOD, we collectively as a community need to have a real hard think about what does future training, what is it trying to achieve? And also really to make the point that this might be anathema to some people, that the simulations that we use to underpin our training systems are just enablers. They're important enablers and we can't do it without them, but they are just enablers. What we're actually trying to do is deliver that training effect, that training impact to our personnel. And there's far more to that training system than the simulation. So we need to think about how do we capture the requirements that we're trying to meet with our training? How do we design our scenarios and our injects and our management in order to achieve them? What do we need from our simulations and then the runtime aspects? And it's not just the modeling of the environment, but giving the instructors the levers, the tools to get in and manipulate the scenario in real time to make sure that the trainees are getting the optimal training experience. And then at the back end, there's all that, the piece around the after action review and the feedback to the trainees. So how do we optimize that? Because that's when the learning really happens. That's the most valuable part, to give them actionable feedback. We've then got another piece after that, which is to review how the system performed on that day and use that as evidence to go into continuous improvement of our systems. So we learn what worked well, what didn't work well, where we need to fill gaps in the capabilities of our training system, and adopt a continuous improvement mentality rather than a sort of periodic upgrade to the system. Let's try and do the best we can with these systems. So just to dig into a few bits here. So I touched on it before, but the data analytics side, the ability to pull all that data out of our training systems and do clever stuff with it is great, but we do need to think about the enterprise as a whole. So the starting position for any training course should be review the needs of the trainees that are coming onto that system. So what is the delta in terms of their performance, their behavior that we're looking for? A lot of the time we assume everyone's the same. They're not. But at the moment, it's really too hard to sort of personalize the training for that individual. But a lot of the data analytics, the AI is there, and if used properly, can help us customize how we deliver that training experience to that individual or that team or that collective. It would be good if we didn't have to start from scratch with each training course, each training system. So being able to pull data from the previous course, their previous operational experience in, and actually use that as a dynamic input into the training system. I don't think we've got that now. I think there maybe are a few places where we're doing part of that, but actually being able to do that as our routine business as usual, I think would be a fantastic enabler for accelerating our people through their training and taking up less of their time to do that, and fewer resources overall. And then at the other end, that ability to then upload their status at the end of that training into their operational deployments or into their next training course, again, is a fantastic capability if we can get there. But I don't really see much in the way of effort going into that data interoperability thinking at the moment. And I think that's an area where we can make collectively, we can make a big step change in the effectiveness and the efficiency of our training delivery. Similar story with AI. So the use of AI throughout that training system, so from the capturing of the requirements, through design, through execution, review, and feedback. Again, I don't think we really want to be in a place where every training system has its own suite of those tools. So I think there needs to be some thought into how we develop them to be reused across multiple systems. You could make an argument that sort of training a airborne ISTAR person is a different job from being on board a frigate building the picture. But actually, a lot of the skills and knowledge are the same between them. They're just applying them in slightly different ways. So actually understanding where there are overlaps in those roles, where there are differences, and actually being able to multiply up the data and feed that into our AI systems, I think would be really advantageous. So really, I think what I'm asking for is for the community as a whole and for DSTL, the rest of MOD, to kind of get our act together and start thinking about this as a holistic system of systems, an enterprise approach to how we do future learning, education, and training. Perfect. And I think that I'll pass on.
Thank you very much. You're absolutely on time. So thanks very much for that, Ian. I'm going to be asking later if you've got the systems in place to actually deliver all of that. It'd be interesting. I know the answer anyway. We are welcoming back to DSET this year one of our very favourite people who actually came and supported DSET when he was at PEO Stry, and he's not in uniform today, he's in secret uniform. Will you please give a big welcome to Colonel Charles Seaberry? Thank you.
Thought I was third. Okay, so first and foremost, before I get started, so Tess and the entire DSET team, I just want to say thank you. You're right, inviting me back for the third time. Truly humbling approach to be here for what this conference actually means, the ability to collaborate and innovate. And coming back here is a little bit emotional because every time I come back here, I'm in a different role. That's the United States Army for you. They get us lethal enough, and then they change us out, and we rely on the backbone of our organizations, which is the civilian community, truly the continuity of what they do. Today, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about Army Futures Command. And a lot of you guys may be familiar with AFC, but if you're not, I'll provide just a short bit of detail and context of how we are postured internationally and globally. The so what, as I look out into the audience and understand the folks and demographics of the folks that are online, we got a number of industry, academia, military, ally, and close partners that are uniquely interested in the United States' concept moving forward. For those that are familiar, in 2018, Army Futures Command established this beautiful command that was centered around modernization. And many of you guys may be tracking the modernization efforts. There's 6 of them specifically. I'll probably show you a slide. Most of this is going to be kind of ad lib as I kind of read the audience. If I see folks going to sleep now, I'll start flipping slides like crazy. But if you remember back to the 6 modernization efforts, starting with anywhere from long range precision fires down to soldier lethality, one of the things that we had to realize is that the U.S. has a U.S. perspective. And when you take that perspective, understanding that 75% of the world's research happens outside of the United States, I didn't understand this until they asked me to do this role. I raised my hand and says, heck yeah, I'll move to London. But moving to London, I inherited what they call the Atlantic portfolio. And so this is going to kind of be an educational reference. I'll run you through a couple of slides and teach you about that, because there's also, luckily for some of the folks that are interested, a unique opportunity to do business. I do have a few dollars. that I'm handing out, but they won't happen at this conference. But I'm uniquely interested in collaborative opportunities to do a number of things, and we'll talk about a couple of them. As I go into a little bit different context for the purposes of this forum, when we talk about future frontiers, Army Futures Command, since move from modernization, is also faced with a different complexity, which is, one, their initial assumption under modernization is to build an army of 2030. 2030 is not so far away, and you guys are very familiar with some of the things that they're doing. But under the new leadership, General Rainey got an additional subset of tasks, which is to design an army of 2040. Sounds easy. You just kind of get a few smart people in the room, and we think about a few simple questions. What type of conflicts will we be in 2040? What does the Army need to look like in 2040? How will we even fight in 2040? And I'll challenge all of you guys that may think you have the answer. A number of our leadership says, hey, we may actually get it wrong if we decide today. So the Future Frontiers Forum is a great opportunity for us to all collaborate and kind of figure out what we individually think and collectively think the whole construct of those questions look like in 2040. And as we collaborate on those and we kind of figure out what technology potentially can do for us, that's how do I change the next slide? That's how I came into my role as we look at technology. And so my job is centered around very early left of bang science and technology research and development efforts. The reason why I put this slide up here for names and faces, if you can obtain a name and face with an interest or a subset of interests that you may have, I think it's very important. The two guys you see at the top, obviously me and my deputy, we live here in London in the United Kingdom, and we're kind of aligned with the Navy and Air Force and Corps of Engineers. The uniqueness of that is we have somewhat of a tri-service joint flavor to understand exactly what you guys need to be helping us get after. The way we do this is in basic and applied research. And so that's heavy engagements with industry, some academia, or sorry, I'll say mostly academia, some industry, as well as technology centers that are geographically dispersed in very specific areas. One, as a 5i partner here, especially near and dear to my heart here in the UK, we have an office here that's centered on Army staff talks and allowing you guys to understand both ways, exercises and impact opportunities to do business with the United States Army. In Germany, we have two offices, but one I'll talk about is in Northern Europe that's split up in the northern part, is right under the Baltics, that gets after our understanding of, and I won't go over all of them, but if you think about some of the things that are actually happening in Ukraine. And so the lessons learned allow us to collaborate with you guys to figure out right now what we need, but most certainly what we need in the future. And then in Southern Europe, we have an office in Paris, France, that's aligned to that embassy. But they cover about 25 other countries throughout that geographic region. And then lastly, in the Mediterranean, located in Tel Aviv, Israel, getting after Dubai, Turkey, and a number of other countries. And then we have technology integrators to the right, but I'll show you kind of what they do. Here's the global enterprise of what Army Futures Command is geographically aligned to do: support the entire globe. For the purposes of my job, I cover Europe, Africa, and the Middle East, and it keeps me tremendously busy. But as we look at targeted opportunities, we'll just talk about the left. And so I can stay on time. There's your SIG modernization efforts up in the top left-hand corner. One of the things that I'll also challenge you to talk to me about as we sidebar is opportunities to collaborate with centers and labs, roughly about 17,000 PhD scientists and academic professionals in the United States that come abroad to help us get after some of these areas. So you may say, what are those areas? I'm not a smart person. I won't go through them, but anywhere from quantum, hypersonic flight, artificial intelligence, what we've talked about a little bit, to synthetic biology. The way it aligns here is a number of our organizations back in the United States, they send over PhD professionals to align with some type of capabilities that you guys may be on. And then that right there is just a visual of how it all comes together. But the last thing that I'll say so that I can remain on time is in the beginning, I said, hey, there's a collaborative opportunity for me and you to kind of do business together. And I think a lot of industry professionals, as well as academic partners, may want that. And so I wanted to show you some of the keys that we possess, or shall I say tools, for you guys to kind of align with us. If you are from the perspective of academic partnerships, on the forefront of basic and applied research, contact us and we can do business. But when it looks to align your technology that companies may have that aligns with the TRL levels 1 through maybe 6, we do have assessment programs that I'd like to kind of encourage you guys to reach out to us and figure out how we can integrate you guys into some of these modernization platforms. The last thing that I'll talk about is the comparative testing opportunities. These are for more mature capability, TRL 6 to 9. Basically, as I went downstairs and I saw on the showroom floors, there's some technology that's ready to go. And so I'd eagerly ask you guys to kind of talk to us about integrating that technology. And it's not just from a U.S. perspective. The very last thing that I'll talk about is the uniqueness to the international partnerships that we have with our allies and partners. I'm also the lead NATO rep that aligns to the United States going back into what we do over here in the Atlantic region. The importance of that is to establish a connection between you, a company, or a small or big, or a small modernization effort, or a large modernization effort. And as you guys talk to our organization, what we also do is we send this information correlative to whatever military organization that you align to. So we talked about Dstl. Obviously, a number of our royal mates are in line with what we do for the UK. But we're centered around the globe, specifically 111 countries where we do research, 45 militaries to where we neck in. And so if you guys are wondering about the uniqueness from a U.S. perspective, I'm basically at this time telling you that it is incumbent upon us to share this information amongst our NATO ally partners. We'll be around to answer questions as we talk about future frontiers and other things, and I'll be around tomorrow. But subject to any questions that we have on the panel, that's all I have for you today. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Charles. And Charles and his team are really open for engagement. I mean, half your world is engagement now, isn't it? So please do go and find him. I was going to say hunt him down, but that sounds completely wrong. So the next speaker that we're going to hear from today, I'm actually thrilled about. This has come out of our big push into serious games. And Sam Cullimore, who I think is running the tech in the next room, should be here to take credit for some of this as well. Serious games has really grown, and it's I'm not going to steal your sandwiches. It's a way of engaging and training and learning in a super fast way, actually, that meets some of those challenges of cost and efficiency that Ian was talking to earlier. We do have a serious games vote happening this week. Please go down and look at the serious games. There's some brilliant stuff. On the back of your badge is a little QR code, and you can vote for the most enjoyable game, which is going to get presented on Thursday. And also to those online, you can still engage with all of the serious games. They've all got booths in the virtual space. And actually, we did say this yesterday, but there are prizes for the most virtually engaged people on the time. So we do see you. We really appreciate you. And there's loads of people online. We had over 1,000 in there yesterday. So it's very important. So Elizabeth Newbury from the Wilson Center, all the way from the US. I'm going to let you brief everybody about the wonderful things that you do. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And this is my first time at this conference. I also am coming more from the civil service, if my slides don't give that away, that I am not military. A little bit about the Serious Games Initiative. I wanted to sort of set the boundaries of where my expertise lies and where I'm coming from more broadly in the field. Particularly, one thing I should flag is obviously I'm from the US. We are focused more at the Wilson Center. We're a federal think tank, or a federal instrumentality that is a think tank. So Congress keeps our lights on, and we also get funding from outside sources as well, very similar to our Smithsonian Institute. The Serious Games Initiative, though, was founded about 20 years ago with the idea that games can be used for positive social impact, education, engagement. And the way we mostly orient is towards how can we use this platform this being video games, digital games, or other sorts of tabletop exercises to engage broad publics in leading policy issues and policy education. So some of our games, shameless plug, that are downstairs include one that's on AI and bias that we use as part of our technology labs, which is a 6-week seminar series for both congressional as well as executive branch staff in the US. We're potentially looking to expand to Europe, but TBD on that. We're also showing off the Plastic Pipeline, which is a game I developed with our China Environment Forum, which is about single-use plastic pollution. And it's a game that brings policy research really to life. But I'm here to talk to you about esports. The reason for this, twofold. One of which I was sort of inspired by the venue here. We're here at the Ashton Gate, and this is a sports venue in part. Before I joined the Wilson Center, I also wrote my dissertation on more or less why other people watch people play games on the internet, aka esports. I had to really walk my committee through that. But esports also is a point of interest for a lot of our governmental staff, both as far as a cultural diplomacy tool, as well as a broader engagement tool. Again, the Serious Games Initiative started about 20 years ago, and what was happening about that time is that the Army, US Army, I should say, was using video games as a recruitment tool, Army of One. Esports is a really bustling, competitive use of video games that is a worldwide phenomenon. So some of the statistics we have here is that there's 532 million viewers worldwide, and that was just in 2002. That's a big deal. And it's one of the reasons why I wanted to bring it up here and sort of lay some breadcrumbs to think through with your expertise how this might be used as either a training device, as an engagement tool or outreach, reskilling opportunities, and other sorts of forms of engagement. One of the things I also want to flag is I've been doing discussions on esports since around 2012. And so really, I've seen the field change a lot in those few years. It's solidifying. One of the things is that I don't have to argue with how you spell esports, which is a big deal. And then the other side of it is that there's a lot of growing opportunities to be using this across different platforms. It's no longer just a PC game field, but it's also growing into virtual reality, augmented reality, and other forms of engagement. So it's really starting to up and coming. And one of the things I'm going to be talking about today is really some of the 4 key trends that I see in esports. Again, within the United States. I would love for someone to fund some field research here so that I can go to UK esports events, but unfortunately, I have to confine it to what I do have experience with. So these 4 pivot points that I'm seeing and should really gather a lot of attention with over the next couple of years are the growth of collegiate esports, health in esports, virtual reality or augmented reality in esports, and sports diplomacy. I'll try to be brief on these first 2 points because it may not be universal interest, but I'm happy to talk about them more offline or in one-on-ones on the side. But one of the areas of massive growth that I've seen in the past couple of years is the collegiate growth in esports. And there's a couple of different things that I've seen grow. One, there's a developing group and body of colleges that are participating in esports. The NACE, National Association of College Esports, which is a nonprofit organization, purports to have 260 college members within the United States. The games covered here offer a very varied wide range. So it can be everything from League of Legends. Apologies if these are titles that you are not familiar with, but I've also been doing some translation of the acronyms that have been on some of these panels. But League of Legends is one. Valorant, Counter-Strike, which I imagine many of you are familiar with. Counter-Strike, Valorant, and then a couple of others that are growing in popularity. So it's not confined to any particular one title. One of the most interesting growth spaces that I've seen in collegiate esports is really this growth in both spaces that esports is happening and majors for esports within college environments. The spaces is particularly interesting because where esports happens can be a multi-use space in a lot of these college campuses. So I put out some examples here, like Syracuse University. I have a upstate New York affiliation. So with Syracuse University, they have a new esports room that has 36 gamer-grade computers, consoles, board games, sim racing stations, VR, and dedicated streaming spaces. A lot of the funding for the early esports spaces, particularly there was an example that I know of DARPA helping fund a esports space at a historically Black college within Virginia. One of the reasons why there was interest in developing these spaces is because they do have this number of facilities for computing, but also they have the capacity to really engage the broader community and bring them into college at a very young age, sort of seeing the opportunities and the growth opportunities there, connecting it with STEM education, connecting it with STEAM education, but also more importantly, where they are playing, they are also watching, they are also researching games, they are also engaging in the development of games. So these esports spaces are a particular interest for the college environment. Majors for esports follow a similar trajectory to both the historically like sports centered majors. So like communication is one, but also the sort of spaces that are associated with computer science. So graphic design and that sort of thing, as well as business. A lot of the historically Black colleges that I've worked with in the past have focused a lot on that business aspect and entrepreneurship opportunities that esports is offering as a growing space. So that's the college teaser trailer. I'm happy to dive into it more later. One of the other areas that is of interest is research into esports. And one of the ways that I've looked at this is through health and competition, so health and esports. One of the points that was interesting, we put on a roundtable discussion where we had a lot of different stakeholders, both from civil service, research spaces, as well as military spaces, and trying to get a scope of some of the concerns as well as some of the benefits of esports that they're seeing. A lot of the concerns come with the physicality and the demands of esports. So burnout being a really significant one. This idea that esports is part of the larger gaming society of grind culture and that ethos of just keep going, sitting at a computer for 6, 8, 10, 12 hours a day. And how do we think of creating these spaces where they're getting breaks, where they're getting sort of more physical opportunities? Poor nutrition is one. And one of the things I also want to flag here is that poor nutrition and health risks like carpal tunnel and those sorts of things are of point of interest or point of concern for esports. There have been some professional athletes, if you would charitably call them that. I do, but I know that not everyone agrees. But that have either suffered from diabetes at a very young age, we're talking 15, 16 years old, or carpal tunnel from the repetitive motion of using these cursors. So those are some of the concerns that have arisen from esports. And we need more research to really understand how we can support these very young professional gamers. And the other is focusing on some of the positive aspects. So like during COVID, it was a way for different institutions to connect with one another in a way that they couldn't connect through more traditional sports means. I wanted to also pick up on this because I know that we're all very interested in virtual reality and how that we can intersect that with gaming in general. Virtual reality hasn't picked up really much in esports. There are a couple of very focused leagues in VR, but they are not at the same level as a lot of the PC-based or console-based games. I would suspect that changes over the next couple of years. Part of the barriers for virtual reality within this space are, number one, market penetration. There isn't really a system that is economical for a lot of people to pick up on. There also isn't the same sort of facilitating spectatorship through those technologies that they are now offering through those titles that I mentioned before in a lot of the console-based games. One of the things that I saw shift over the past couple of years for those PCs is that they really did develop an opportunity for people to watch others playing the game at a level that they couldn't necessarily achieve themselves. So if esports would like to go into the VR space, one thing is to really think about those consumer audiences. How do we facilitate watching virtual reality? One of the benefits that I've heard to going more into virtual reality also is that it could potentially end whether esports is a sport debate, because it would provide a very physical way of engaging. One of the ways I've historically heard that pushback is, well, you're just sitting at a computer. So where's the physical in the sport? With virtual reality, you're really kind of pushing that edge. And the other thing that I would highlight as part of that is just there's a more concern, going back to the health argument, of making sure that's facilitated. I'll mention this very briefly because I am close to time. So sports diplomacy is another area that I've seen a lot of interest and growth in. More interest than growth, I should say, but more of opportunities for the future for esports. Esports is a very global phenomenon. Remember, there's over 500 million people watching it worldwide. It's a $1.3 billion economic opportunity. The US Department and some of our other nation states like China have been using esports as a way of soft diplomacy or cultural diplomacy, ways of building connections across youth in particular, but also using it in a very similar style that I'm sure some people in the room are familiar with from like the Cold War sports diplomacy essence. And so there's a long history of using sports for building those connections across nation states. And esports is being used as that, or there's a very cognitive interest in that. So that would be one potential way of expanding esports in the future. And that is it. Thank you.
So thanks very much, Elizabeth. And those that don't know, in the UK, the armed forces are now officially have esports as a funded sport. So on Wednesday afternoon, it could be canoeing or swimming or esports. And we're actually engaged with the esports teams. We had them speak last year. They're coming this year. And next year, we would be hoping to do that in a bigger way. So we can see the crossover between some of the skills and talent. It'd be interesting to hear from the rest of the room and the community to see if you think so too. Last but by no means least, we have David Taylor here, who's head of immersive capability from QinetiQ. Thank you very much.
So good morning, everybody. As Tess said, my name is David Taylor. I'm the head of immersive capability at QinetiQ. And we primarily focus on the uses of virtual, augmented, and mixed reality technologies. And we do that in a number of different areas of application, such as training, but also we're really interested in the potential for this technology to ultimately be used in a very broad sense. So things such as data analysis, visualization, novel experiences, lab type work, test and evaluation. There's a whole host of opportunities, we believe, to be able to use immersive technologies in a number of different ways. We continually assess the types of hardware, new hardware and software that are available to us. And in fact, what we see is a lot of opportunity to utilize things such as gaming engines, such as Unity and Unreal, to build new types of concepts and really be able to apply this technology and expose our customers to this technology in ways that they may not have really understood up to this point. So, for example, recently we've built a mixed reality application that presents digital assets in the physical world and gives an individual a sense that the object that they're seeing in the real world is actually there, when in fact it's just a mixed reality experience. So what I wanted to talk about today was really a number of different potential applications in the future, and also some peripheral technology. So some of this is very speculative, but first, to underpin this, I want to talk about really ethical considerations of the technology itself. And something that really stood out for me, and still does, and I went back and watched this episode just the other day, is an episode from the Netflix series Black Mirror. And Men Against Fire was an episode from 2016, which showed the potential for immersive technologies to potentially manipulate your perception of the real world. This particular episode allowed soldiers to optionally receive an augmented reality implant. And this implant manipulated perception, provided them with an enhanced set of cognition, was able to provide an interface and integration into other devices that would be used in theatre. And the issue with this type of technology ultimately was the fact that individuals using this augmented reality device were desensitized to the environment that they were in. It ultimately manipulated their perception to a point that they were able to carry out activities that morally those activities would never be able to be shouldn't be carried out in a normal theatre of war. And so really what I'm saying is that as we build these new technologies and we allow these new types of capabilities to be utilized for training or for whatever other application, there needs to be some significant thought around the guidelines and policies that need to be put in place to support the deployment of that technology and its responsible use. So if we move on to considering the types of application that we may see in the future. So there was a huge excitement about the metaverse and metaverse technologies a couple of years ago, and that really didn't come to fruition. And the main reason being was that it was ultimately oversold quite a lot. And I did a talk here 2 years ago now that said the metaverse doesn't exist, and still ultimately doesn't really exist. But what I think we will see in the future is an ability to create new types of learning environments using a variety of different immersive technologies, where we will present a classroom of some form, but that classroom will not be as we utilize or provide that capability now. So ultimately, there'll be a lot more learning from experience, where people will be able to experience a particular type of training activity, a particular type of environment, prior to being exposed to that real physical environment. And individuals also, from a physical point of view, I expect people really won't need to travel and congregate in a single locality. Those individuals will be able to access those types of training experiences in from a remote location, where you bring people together and utilize that environment or that space together, as if you were located physically together. And obviously, every presentation can't be without a reference to AI. And from an AI point of view, I absolutely do see where you ultimately will see an AI that will provide oversight in some of those environments and really provide some sort of direction and adaptive learning to individuals. So those training experiences that you go through, or those learning experiences that you go through, no two lessons will be the same, because the content that is you're exposed to will be adapted based on your activity in that environment. Telemedicine up to now has a lot of the time people consider telemedicine to be the use of remote use of or access to medical professionals and interaction with a patient. But certainly some of the interesting areas that we have started to take a look at are around things such as the use of immersive technologies for therapeutic reasons in mental health, and the ability for us to provide experiences to individuals to allow them to negate some of the stresses and strain of day-to-day activity. In addition, certainly augmented reality is already well in use within surgery, and what we expect to see in the future is even more use of the ability to have surgical assistants alongside you, using augmented reality capability. So ultimately, a medic could call on surgical assistance from someone completely remote to you and provide that assistance as if they were standing right next to you. So psychological type therapies are something that is really just starting to develop, but I think it's certainly something that is very interesting as a future technology. And there is already some research. You want to take a look at what research is already out there that does start to show that there is some significant benefit in using virtual reality for mental health. As I talked about in that Black Mirror episode, cognition and being able to enhance cognition is one of the potential really good benefits of utilizing immersive technologies, such as VR or augmented or even mixed reality. And that ability to enhance an individual's cognition can really ultimately provide a significant improvement in an individual's performance. And some of the early work or the early research that we're starting to examine has led to us identifying some real benefit in the ability to provide some supportive information and supportive direction to an individual wearing a headset. And in fact, they can complete into the particular tasks that we gave an individual. They were able to complete those tasks far quicker than they would have done without that supportive information provided in an XR headset. We also see the potential for emotional development. So where you can expose individuals to an XR environment, whereby this would be pre-deployment, they would allow them to understand what an environment is like in the real world, the types of people they may interact with, so from an empathy point of view, or also be able to manage stress through building up resilience to that stress because of the exposure that they'll receive initially to an XR or immersive environment. We see some real benefits there. Virtual collaboration is one of the areas that I think have got some real benefits, and it's the start. We're at the start of our ability to start using some of this technology right now. So there's been lots of attempts in the past to be able to bring people together in a virtual space, and there's lots of platforms already out there that allow you to carry out this type of activity where you can bring people together. In COVID certainly allowed for some acceleration into the development of environments, virtual environments that allow people to work together and collaborate together. So, but I also see there is some benefit in some of the newer technologies that provide digital displays, virtual displays, and the ability to move away from the need for physical displays all the time when you're using a computing device, and to look towards more virtual displays, digital displays that therefore allow you to access the information that you need to access, but driven by the compute device. So you remove a lot of the weight and the complexity of a device if you're removing those display devices. Use a virtual display device instead. And hybrid workspaces is something relatively new, I think, in terms of the capability of the technology to provide a sense of presence of other individuals to be in your physical space. So where you don't actually work in a virtual space, you bring people in as a digital asset into your physical space, and therefore you can still maintain some sense of presence in that physical space, but work with digital people who are presented digitally to you is something that of interest in the future. Being able to tie all this technology together requires significant connectivity improvements in the future. And at the moment, when we move between our homes and go into the outside world, we don't particularly think too hard about how our devices are connected. They do just move from Wi-Fi to 4G, for example. In the future, really, we need a capability where we are just connected at all times, and certainly immersive devices will need that capability to have access to significantly faster data speeds and really ultra low latency to support the types of experiences that we might want to present to people in the future. And if we are able to provide those types of data services that do provide ultra low latency and very fast data speeds, we can start to think about the types of new service demands that we can place on those networks. So, for example, brain-computer interfaces may well need in the future to have access to a whole array of information repositories. And if we have if we have information services that are able to respond and provide that information in the same speeds as we can think, then that provides a significant change in the way we interact with the internet. And then finally, just a thought on future generations and Generation Alpha. So I know from my experience with my two sons, they are already dual screening or tri-screening at home, where they'll be using an Xbox, the phone's set to one side with something playing on it, and they'll also be watching a TV screen. So they never ever will sit and watch a single screen at any one time. So these the Generation Alpha, who ultimately are digital from birth, because there's a complete expectation that they have access to information via screens at the moment, these physical screens, I think will change in the future, whereby access to that information, those information sources, will be completely virtual. But what that means is that the long-term implications of that, we need to be able to provide those types of tools in the future to support those individuals who are now Generation Alpha, to be able to utilize those information sources and utilize that technology in a way that they use it and expect at home. That's it. Thank you very much.
Just a reminder that you can use your apps to ask questions if you're too shy or don't want to speak into a microphone. But do we have any questions in the room to get us started? Yes, Mr. Max. That's his official name, Mr. Max, rather than Colonel Max Garrity, actually.
Thanks, Abby. Thank you for the presentations. Really interesting. I'm very mindful of me being Generation X, and my kids are definitely not. There's an awful lot of talk about the remoteness of working, particularly in the QinetiQ bit, and with the gaming environment as well. Human interaction is everything. The big problem I found in lockdown, and I still find it now with the propensity of MOD to sit there and do everything through Teams, is that we're humans and we respond to the reactions of people's faces and body language, etc. And so at some point, there's got to be an optimum level of maintaining a level of human interaction, direct face-to-face, and getting no response off the back end of a Teams call, which is the most frustrating thing ever. Constantly having comms checks going, sorry, can you still hear me? Is everyone still there? This kind of approach. In terms of research, what is the trend? What is the thinking? Because the message I took away from that is that this is how it's changing, which to Generation X is quite alarming. To my kids' generation, who are 3 screens, phones, and all over this, it's not a problem to them. I'm just curious to your perspectives.
I think that was me. So I can talk from some personal experience of some of the work we've done in the past. So over COVID, we did try virtual meetings and bring people together into virtual spaces. And those some of those experiences weren't great because there was no facial expression. And body tracking wasn't particularly good at that moment in time using the technology that we were using. Since then, certainly some of the headsets that we've tried provide really good facial tracking. And you can certainly, although the avatar that represents an individual is very much cartoon-like at the moment, the facial expression makes such a significant difference with some of the headsets that allow that facial tracking that it's quite eerie that the experiences that you can have talking to someone who looks similar to a colleague. Some of the really good research I've seen recently with Meta, for example, where they're able to provide a very close representation to you as an individual, shows that. We've also seen we've seen some information leaked onto the web in terms of how far that's going to go in terms of headsets that are coming in the future. I think that ability to represent individuals, certainly from a facial point of view and a facial expression point of view, that's really going to be really close around the corner. I don't think we're too far away from seeing that properly.
Yeah. I'd like to add on a little bit, give you a little bit of U.S. Army perspective. Obviously, in a previous life, I was the PM for synthetic training environment, no longer in that capacity. So huge respect for AR and VR and where we're going with it. And definitely don't want to negate the options behind, or shall I say, ethics and emotions, the replacement of. But something that General Rainey, our 4-star that governs Army Futures Command, is looking at is human-machine integrated formations. And I like his quote behind it. The ability to not trade blood for first contact is the way that we're trying to augment, not necessarily take the human out of the loop, but augment robotics and AI to replace some of the functions that a human would do to increase readiness and their lethal or kinetic engagements downrange over.
Hold it down.
Yes.
Okay. So I think what I'm hearing is your concerns around socialization, pro-social behavior, and learning around pro-social behavior. There's a lot of body of work on that pro-social element and how games can really help facilitate that. They're not a silver bullet, and I would never say that any platform is a silver bullet for any sort of education. But the concerns that come from a lot of conversations around gaming and that they are isolating students is just not founded by the research. It depends on the individual user, I would say. However, there's a lot of evidence where, especially again during COVID, these sort of platforms provided a level of socialization and connectivity that we couldn't get through other means. There was for example, I looked at Animal Crossing as a means of connection, and there was a lot of evidence of people retaining their sort of social connections there. Looking at video games as an isolated experience, I think also discredits the ways that these users and people who use those platforms are part of a broader point of multimodal engagement. So it's not just the gaming platform. It's really they engage on platforms. They talk to their friends at school about what they did in Valorant or whatever platform they're playing. Minecraft is also very popular in the United States still. So I think that I would just caution with any sort of fear around the potential isolating effects, and know that this is a conversation that has happened with almost every single emerging technology since the history of man. Books were also considered once a potentially socially isolating experience, that they were very concerned we would get lost in these fantasy worlds and not be able to connect with anyone. So it's not unfounded necessarily, but it is. There's a lot of research that suggests that these can facilitate as laws pro-social as well.
Thank you for that. Ian, any thoughts?
Yeah, I was just going to flag up that it was a while ago now. It was late noughties. We, as part of the research that led to the Gladiator collective training system for the air, we did a research around the benefits, disbenefits of co-located co-locating the trainers versus distributing them, so limiting their social interaction. And what we found was that by limiting that social interaction, it really had a negative impact on trust. And actually, by allowing them to socialize beforehand and then distributing that, they built those social bonds, they'd built that trust between them, and they were able to train effectively for a period of time before you then had to bring them back together physically to recreate those bonds between them. So I think there is a balance and a blend that we need to think about.
And I will just add from personal experience with younger people, especially who are neurodiverse, for example, a lot of their interactions are online, and we employ a higher percentage than usual of neurodiversity into this space because of the nature of coding and technology and everything else. And in fact, the young people I work with, 95% of their interactions are online and through gaming. And when they meet up in real life, it's just they know that person. So in fact, it could, like the research shows, actually increase human interaction. And I'm certainly up for being an avatar and popping into someone's virtual world. And I was just thinking as well, what about we model all of our armed forces? You can have all of your own avatar to your weight, height, specs, everything else. I think that might get some people out on the PT field. What do you think about that, having your own avatar? So when you're deployed, you can still be in the room. What about you, Colin? What do you think about that? Okay. Right, have we got any more questions in the room, please? Yes, or Nella?
Person's getting their workout.
Thank you. Sorry, Abby, for having you run around. I was thinking you talked about learning from experience, and we already saw some cases of gamers, sim races that became actual races in a real racing car. What about, what is your take on the future of war gamers that might become real military people, real soldiers?
I can start that off because actually that's already happening. Because professional war gamers are being hired into the reservists here in the UK Armed Forces for that exact specialist skill. So I don't know if anybody else wants to add to that.
Yeah, so, as always, my perspective is going to be, a strategic level Army enterprise. But as Tess mentioned, absolutely. So for the number of collegiate schools that we gear for senior leaders in the U.S. Army, one being the U.S. Army War College, wargaming is obviously going on now. Collaborative to the Soldier Center and the synthetic training environment in Orlando, there's a number of wargaming opportunities being inserted into this synthetic environment that allows us to max the one world terrain, which is a globe configuration to allow an individual soldier to be resident in any future environment or current environment. So there's, depending on the detail of the question, broadly speaking, we are doing that in many ways in the U.S. already.
One thing I would add here is with serious games research, there's a lot of evidence that games can really be a motivating factor for further engagement with the topic. And this is across STEM education, this is across civil learning, this is across a bunch of different fields. It's one of the reasons why we employ serious games, is that they lower the barrier of accessibility to a topic that they may not otherwise engage with. So for the example, the Wilson Center has a game about what only in DC would we think is the most exciting topic, and that is the federal budget. It's called thefiscalship.org, but we've had over 4 million people play that game, and it's easier to access a 15-minute to 20-minute gaming simulation on the federal budget, get a sense of ownership over those topics, and not have to read a 25-page policy brief on it as a form of getting people to dip their toe in that. So I would say if you're looking for a broad engagement tool, video games are definitely one way to go for any topic.
What do we think about putting all of DSTL's policies on video games? And do you think they'd be more implemented? I actually have a question from online, or a couple of questions actually. So there's somebody who's just made a comment actually that says, in the military police community, we're finding it challenging to instill confidence in newer airmen when responding to mental health crisis calls. What are some effective ways to improve their training?
To improve, there's very possibly an opportunity there to look at potentially building out a course that allows for, as we said before, that empathy capability, that where individuals have not been had that opportunity to be exposed to that type of environment before, and so it may well be a perfect fit for the use of immersive technology in that case, I think.
Any other thoughts?
Yeah, a few years back, we did some work with the Home Office around creating a first on-scene VR experience. So we worked with a company called River to create what we colloquially call the murder flat. So the idea is a fairly junior police officer would get an experience of actually being able to be first on scene, understand what they needed to do to preserve the integrity of the scene, to protect themselves, and to look after any survivors that might be present, as a way of a gentle introduction, so that when they experience something like it for real, they would be in a better mental state to deal with that.
Yeah, I know the system, and it's 360 video. What I'm interested as well is, was there anything done to check on the mental health of the person after they've been through that training?
So where we got to with that was it was done as a tech demonstrator to show that it was possible. We did want to go further and actually get into proper trials, but the Home Office wasn't willing to fund them at the time. But I think there is there's definitely something in there, given the other sort of body of evidence around using VR for mental health, robustness, and the like.
And I know there's quite a lot of app development and apps out there for mental health support as well. So, and the International Committee of the Red Cross does a lot in that space as well. So there are answers on there. Anonymous, whoever you are, you can DM me if you'd like to on the platform, and we can try and get some more answers for you. There's one more question, which we've just got time for, from Brian Jacob online as well. Thank you. With the advancement of training seen within future technology, such as AI development, simulation, and XR integration into more modern training, can you foresee this technology becoming a blocker in the future, where the demands from the training would mean that the hardware would be overly pushed beyond the current hardware setup with the current materials used within the current future released hardware? I guess he's saying, and correct me if I'm wrong, Byron, that the hardware is not going to keep up with what you need.
So I can answer a small part of that, and it's a really great question, and an increased phobia amongst not just our end user, but industry, right? Because industry is responsible for producing a lot of hardware, and if that hardware is obsolete, then the juice isn't worth the squeeze. We have this thing called a continuous transformation construct, where we are rebuilding and looking at the ideas of rebuild in terms of major technologies every 18 to 24 months. And so I heard it in the previous conference, as it relates to software injecting into hardware, we do this beautiful thing called MOSA, which is the modular open system architecture that allows us to kind of take best in breed capability and replug it into upgraded hardware. So to answer your question specifically, the U.S. Army doesn't feel threatened by the obsolescence of potential hardware. What it really does is it continues to motivate industry to stay ahead of what they think our requirements are. And I'd like to change the think into know by talking to guys like us to figure out real deal what our requirements are. Oh.
I mean, charitably, my first thought was how expensive each gaming rig I've built or bought over the past couple of years has been. But I think that one of the areas of interest for me is also these low-grade technologies that make this sort of technology accessible. So, for example, the Google Cardboard was massively of interest to a lot of educators within the United States because it used existing technologies that they all had. And they also really tried to make it as easily accessible for college. Like, you didn't have to buy anything. You could literally print it off on cardboard. A lot of the educators that I work with are operating off of Chromebooks. So when we're designing games, especially, we aren't also necessarily getting to play with the shiniest new toys. We're thinking of how do we create these technologies for those who are in rural communities who may not have cognitivity issues, who are operating off of Chromebooks, who may not have like the most advanced graphics card. So I guess my pushback would be trying to understand the audiences that you're engaging with and what the actual needs of those audiences are when thinking of implementing training.
Yeah, cool. And also building to the lowest tech that's available.
Yeah.
So the International Committee of the Red Cross, if you don't know, they do a CASEVAC training system as well. And it's all done to work on mobile phones with like 3G connection so that people can download it and train where they are in the world. And if we, I think sometimes like that, look for your lowest thing, can it still be amazing? And it can still work. I'm going to ask the team now for some final thoughts before we break for lunch. And you've got a lovely long lunch before this afternoon. We're not back in here until 2:00 or 1500 if you're in Europe at the moment online, and 10 a.m. in the States. And we'll slowly see people your side. We're waking up now, actually, and joining in for breakfast. So, any final thoughts, Charles?
Yeah, so I'd just say thanks for the opportunity. Like I said earlier, this is always a great opportunity for us to kind of come together and collaborate and innovate. So I'd say not make me a liar, and let's collaborate over the next few days and take a business card. I'd look to set up an opportunity to talk with you guys about the great things that you're doing. Thank you.
Yes, just to really emphasize that from DSTL as an organization, we're very much focused on the future. We want to work with the community as closely as possible. We want to work with you to try and make your ideas come to fruition. Ultimately, we want to make the whole defense training enterprise more capable, more robust, more able to deal with the challenges that our people are going to face in the future. So please talk to us.
Yeah, I'd just like to say what we've presented today shows sort of how broad the potential application is for immersive technologies, and certainly from a QinetiQ point of view, we're exploring in a number of different directions because there's some real opportunity out there. So if anyone has any ideas at all that they think is this even possible or achievable using these types of technologies, then I'm more than happy to have a conversation with you.
Likewise, I want to say thank you for this opportunity, and it's so interesting to be here at DSET for the first time. Please check out all of the games in the Serious Games Showcase downstairs, including our own, as well as connect with Tess if you would like to push for an esports tournament here next year. So.
No pressure. All right, I'll do it. Okay, so you can hold me to that. Finally, Colonel Charles is actually chairing a session tomorrow, and Elizabeth will be going into more detail in the Serious Games panel Thursday morning as well. Please engage with them totally. We've got 5 speakers in the CNI session this afternoon, so it's going to be really pacey and really fast. I'm going to let you go. Can we please show us appreciation and break for lunch? Thank you.